Happy Monday, all you minties. Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for your advanced look at the War of the Kings Omnibus from Marvel Comics. Now, this is the new printing, so we'll also be comparing it to the original printing. So, join me. Before getting started, I want to give a huge thank you to David Gabriel and the fine folks at Marvel for sending us an advanced copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and book market on April 11th or 12th, depending on where you get your books. And yes, this is one that was delayed. It was supposed to come out last year. It was one that you all voted for to get reprinted, but it is finally here. Very close to release date. And we have a brand new cover. This is a direct market cover. That one is drawn by Brandon Peterson, whereas the standard edition cover, this is my original printing by the way, is drawn by David Yarden. So they are using this right here, this file for the dust jacket, for standard edition printing. And this is of course a wraparound image, meaning that your spines are going to look like this. And that's always been an issue with the wraparound images, that you never know who's going to end up on the spine. However, the direct market spine has been redone because, well, this was just a splash page. It was a cover, it wasn't a wraparound image. And you have another Brandon Peterson image down there. So that is the big difference. And of course, direct market covers are only available through your local comic book shop or places online like cheapgraphicnovels.com, waltzcomicshop.com, Dying Breed Collectors, Comics Bugle, Tales of Wonder, in-stock trades, organic price books, or DCBS, places like that. And then the back of the book. And Brandon Peterson getting a lot of love on this dust jacket. The price of the book is $125. Here's the contents down here, and in the direct market, the contents are up there. Now, let's look at it underneath the dust jacket. I've always loved this image. Before I show you the whole image, did want to compare the sizes of those spines. Looks like the original printing is just a little bit thicker than the new printing, and almost feels like the image has been shifted to the right. Here, let's take a closer look. Yeah, sure enough, the image has been blown up. You know, I've seen that before, though, with the new printings of some book. The images have gotten larger, and I wonder why that is. And let's take a look at the entire image. Oh my gosh, this pretty much sums up exactly what this is. You have the Guardians of the Galaxy in there. You have the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. You have the Inhumans. You have the Skrulls. Holy crap. Only one really missing from this that's a big player is Nova. But that's what this big crossover is about. And for the people wondering like where I put it on my shelf, I have done a reading order of the Modern Cosmic Saga, but just in case, this is where it belongs. In between the road to the War of the Kings and the Realm of the Kings Omnibus. Now, there is a little bit of double dipping if you have the Guardians of the Galaxy by DNA Omnibus. Those issues are collected. Some of those issues are collected in this omnibus. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So, before going any further, though, to talk about this event, I have to talk about some of the things that have come previously that set up who Emperor Vulcan is, who the Shi'ar, the Kree, and the Inhumans are during this particular time, and why they're about to get into a huge fight. In order to do that, though, I have to go into some spoiler territory, mainly for the events in the Road to War of the King Omnibus, or some of the stuff that happened to the Inhumans right after the House of M. And a lot of that stuff is collected in the Prelude Omnibus, the Road to War of the Kings Omnibus. So again, I have to talk about this stuff to kind of set up exactly what's happening here, why these parties are clashing, if you will. Nothing huge, but just in case, I do like to warn people going into it, if you're going completely blind, maybe skip that part and get to the comparison. And speaking of comparison, I'm going to do something really quick right now before I go into the book and the artwork. A quick comparison of this spine. The top up here is the original printing, and the bottom is the new printing. That is a huge difference in that eye. So, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that as I compare the two books. And I'll put in the description of the video the timestamp, so in case you don't want any spoilers at all, you can just jump to the comparison. and the build. Alright, so let's go ahead and crack this open and talk about one of my favorite events at Marvel Comics. Alright, before I even crack this open, I forgot to show what the flaps look like. So here we go. A little bit about the galactic war that's about to take place, and then the bios on the creators. I assume the direct market cover, the new one, will have the same information. So in case you have the standard edition, I'm sorry, the standard edition, not direct market, and then the direct market having those same kind of flaps. Alright, let's go ahead and crack this open. Here is your end sheets, and this piece right here by Paul Pelletier. Man, even like cracking that page will kind of spoil something. Here are all the credits of the issues collected in here, and we have Uncanny X-Men 475 to 486, or as I like to call it, X-Men in Space. And there he is himself, Gabriel Summers, aka Vulcan, and this is the story of how he will become Emperor. Love this image. This is when Billy Tan took over the book. I remember Chris Claremont made a message that he was leaving X-Men. I was so heartbroken. Ed Brubaker was like, I'm taking over. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know how I feel about Deadly Genesis. Oh, man. So I was not looking forward to this. But I'll talk a little bit about that here in a few. And let's talk about what this collects, though. So Uncanny X-Men 475 to 486. It's one big story. X-Men Emperor Vulcan 1 through 5, Secret Invasion War of the Kings, X-Men Kingbreaker 1 through 4, War of Kings Darkhawk 1 and 2, War of Kings Warriors 1 and 2. Then you actually have the War of Kings event 1 through 6. You have the Ascension miniseries, the 4-issue miniseries. Mitch Uncanny Omar talk pretty one day. Savage World of Sakaar, and that's a one-shot. Nova 23 through 28, that's his 2007 series. Guardians of the Galaxy 13 through 19, that's the 2008 series. War of Kings Who Will Rule, which is like your aftermath of War of the Kings. I keep calling it War of the Kings, it's just War of Kings, sorry. And then the Marvel Spotlight, War of Kings, and material from X-Men Divided We Stand. Alright, so we kick it off with the aftermath of Deadly Genesis. In Deadly Genesis, we were introduced to a secret group of X-Men that went to Krakoa to save the original X-Men, but they were all wiped out by Krakoa. Well, some of them were. And that kind of predates the things that happen in Giant Size X-Men #1. It's a huge retcon that a lot of people weren't happy with. Some people loved it, some people didn't care. I thought they did some characters wrong, but that's just my 2 cents. Now, we find out that Vulcan was one of these characters, and Vulcan turns out to be the third Summers brother. I don't care if you read X-Men comics in the 80s and 90s. We always had a rumor about that, whether it was going to be Gambit, whether it was going to be Adam X the Extreme, and now we have a new era, and now it's canon. Gabriel Summers is the third Summers brother. So they go on this mission to Krakoa to save the original X-Men, these new X-Men like Vulcan and Darwin and Petra, and they get wiped out. They get killed or believed for dead. Then in Deadly Genesis, we find out, wait a minute, they're not dead. Something happened. So we get the return of Vulcan as well as another character, but Vulcan is snapping because he was left for dead, and then you also get to find out through that story, like who ended up killing his mom, so he's holding that person responsible, so Vulcan takes off for space. Professor X is, during this particular time, not really leading the X-Men because he's lost his powers. That's also something important to note. And he's kind of taken a step back, letting Cyclops lead the team, letting Storm lead the teams. But now he's taken a group of X-Men to space because he feels like he has a chance with doing Vulcan right. He feels guilty for all the things, his sins of the father, if you will, or I guess his own sins. And he wants to make amends. He wants to get Vulcan back on the side of the Angels. So he gets one of Vulcan's brothers, which is Havoc, Polaris, who was evil at first and then saw the good in the X-Men, and Warpath right here, because he also feels like he's guilty for what happened to Thunderbird, Professor X, so he got him, and Nightcrawler, and Rachel Gray. Oh my gosh. So they go off into space. And I'll be honest with you, as much as I didn't want to dig this, I was in. I was like, okay, I like the art. This isn't Deadly Genesis. We've gone past that retcon, and once you get over that retcon, this is about trying to get this character back. So Vulcan has a mission. He is going to the Shi'ar Empire to get revenge for what happened to his mother. I'm not going to go into spoilers as to what happened to his mom. You can find out. And of course, I'm talking about Cyclops and Havoc's mom. And most people know that Havoc and Cyclops' father are still out there in space. That's Corsair. And Corsair leads the Starjammers. We get to meet brand new characters during this arc. And we get to see the X-Men reunited with the Shi'ar Empire. So, as most of you know, a little behind the scenes, there was some cells dropped in X-Men. In the late 90s, X-Men suffered a lot. So when Joe Quesada kind of took over, he decided, okay, let's take it back a little bit. Let's start saying dead means dead, that if somebody gets killed, they're not going to be resurrected. Let's condense a lot of the titles and let's bring it back to the core teams. So he also instituted this idea of, okay, we need to stop talking about like comics that happened 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. It has to kind of be a fresh take. So that part plays, by the way, some of the variant covers are collected in here. And I'll talk about the mapping here in a little bit, because the mapping is important. The mapping isn't affected right now, though. So what I just mentioned is really important because the Shi'ar haven't really been a big part of X-Men for a while. As a matter of fact, before this storyline, the last time we saw the Shi'ar was during the pages of Grant Morrison's run on New X-Men. And even then, the Shi'ar didn't really play a huge part. But now they're about to play a big, important part as this badass named Vulcan is coming to get revenge. So through this story, you get to find out exactly how he ends up ruling this kingdom, and some of it has to do with the Ken, some of it has to do with Deathbird, because if you've been following X-Men, you know that Lilandra was the empress of the Shi'ar Empire, and how he comes to power, well, you can find out for yourself. But by the end of this storyline, the X-Men are separated. Some of them are held prisoners, and some of them go back to Earth. And Vulcan is now Emperor of the Shi'ar Empire. So that's what that big year-long arc was by Ed Brubaker, Billy Tan, that ends in Uncanny X-Men 486. The next story arc that's collected in here, and perfectly so, I agree with this mapping here, just this part, we'll get to the rest of it here in a little bit, is Emperor Vulcan. So this shows you exactly the X-Men and Starjammers that are still prisoners of war, and they're breaking free, and they're trying to start a revolution. Now, if you know much about the Shi'ar Empire, you know that they rule one of the most powerful cosmic forces out there, and that is the Imperial Guard. The most badass of badasses throughout the universe send their people out there to become part of this Imperial Guard. It's almost like an army. So, not only do the X-Men have to deal with Vulcan, but they also have to deal with the Imperial Guard, who unfortunately have to follow the leader. And during this time, the leader is Vulcan. Well, this also introduces us to the idea that the M'Kraan crystal was actually part of the M'Kraan people. And of course, if you read the Dark Phoenix saga, you may be familiar with the M'Kraan crystal. But that's what Emperor Vulcan is. And then we get the little bit of X-Men Divided We Stand, where we get a little bit of Havoc and him just daydreaming about things that are happening on Earth. Because it's also very important to note that while this is happening up in space, we are getting ready for the Messiah complex with the X-Men crossing over here on Earth. Because now we get the Secret Invasion War of Kings. So in the omnibus that happens before this, the Road to War of Kings, or the Prelude to War of Kings, we get to find out what is going on with the Inhumans. So I'm not going to go into detail as to why, but they leave Earth and they're going to space. And when they go to space, they decide, well, let's go back to the Krees. And the Kree Empire right now is trying to expand. And a lot of this is kind of hinted at in the previous miniseries, whether it was Silent Invasion or the Inhumans little miniseries that happened before this. So instead of duking it out with the Kree, the Inhumans decide that, maybe we should join forces. And Ronan, who is now in charge of the Kree Empire, decides, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's join forces. The Kree and Inhuman join forces. And like I said, I'm not going to go into detail about how exactly. Then we get the miniseries of Kingbreaker. I'm loving the way this is mapped. so far. I know I've said that already, but you'll see here in a little bit as to what happens. This introduces us to the idea that, okay, Vulcan is now power hungry. Some of his people are like, wait a minute, this guy's a little off. We can't really trust, a lot of his decisions. So you start seeing the Imperial Guard kind of being divided. And Vulcan wants to expand the Empire. He wants to take over the entire galaxy. Keep in mind, this all started as an X-Men story. This is a guy that was left for dead. He comes back, snaps, goes to the Shi'ar Empire, and decides to take revenge for what happened to his mother and then his life. Now, through this miniseries and the X-Men stories, there are characters. I mean, there are ramifications to these events happening. There are characters that are dying. There's a big decision that is made in that Secret Wars in Humans, Secret Invasion in Humans one-shot, that to make sure that these two people are going to be together and fighting together, the Inhumans and the Kree, they decide that there should be a marriage taking place. Then we get this weird little... I loved it because I'm a huge fan of Darkhawk. We get this 2-issue Darkhawk story where we find out it's still Chris, it's still him with the crystal, but now he's got ties to the Cosmic Saga. Now, you're probably wondering, well, who the hell cares? I did, because I thought they were going to do the same thing that they did with Guardians of the Galaxy or Nova. After Annihilation, we got a Nova series. After Annihilation Conquest, we got a Guardians of the Galaxy series, and that's exactly what it felt like they were doing. They were setting up the character of Darkhawk. Then we have the Warriors storyline. Again, all this setting up the events of War of Kings. We have Blastar showing up here, so the Negative Zone gets involved. We see what the X-Men that are still in space are doing. We see what Crystal is doing with her time. And then we see what the rest of the Shi'ar Empire thinks of this new Emperor. So, this kicks off War of Kings #1. Everything up until this point has been setting up the events that are going to kick off here. Remember I said there was going to be a marriage, and we have Emperor Vulcan. Well, Emperor Vulcan decides that in order to make sure that people get his message that he's the supreme badass, because he's wiped the floor with Gladiator, the strongest Imperial Guard, he's going to show everybody he means business. And to do that, he's going to destroy this wedding day. And that's exactly what he sets out to do. So by doing that, it causes a ripple, and the Inhumans and Kree are now going to war with the Shi'ar Empire, all being led by Vulcan. Now you can find out who stands with Vulcan, where the X-Men are, and what ends up happening to the rest of the cosmic characters. One thing you're probably wondering and asking yourself, where the hell are Nova and the Guardians of the Galaxy? So herein lies the issue that this is mapped exactly like the original printing. It's not terrible. I know people have asked me, like, is it bad? Is it still worth reading? It is absolutely worth reading. I love this storyline. Because what started off as, like, this little corner of Earth with this X-Men story just kept getting bigger and bigger because you were also reading the Cosmic Saga, and that's getting huge. And then for both of the X-Men, Inhumans, Kree, I guess more than 2 people, and Shi'ar to butt heads, and the Guardians and Nova getting caught in the middle. Holy crap. You talk about some planning and building up to this. Oh, man. While I'm not in love with it as much as I love Annihilation Conquest, this is still a solid story, years in the making. So, the issue with the mapping, though, is that all 6 issues of War of Kings are together. So, the 6-issue miniseries is together. But the problem with that is that some stories would have benefited from being in between issues. One of those, for example, is Ascension. Because something happens within Ascension that sets up something huge in War of Kings. I'm not going to talk about which issue or what exactly, because that's a huge, huge spoiler. But I thought that could have been, at the very least, this and Guardians of the Galaxy could have been put in between issues. Nova, here, let's talk about that. So after Ascension, that's where they collect the Savage World of Sakaar. And then we get the Nova issues back here. Now, Nova's dealing with his own thing, and it almost feels like it's really disconnected. So I'm okay with even Nova being in the back. Sure, it's got tie-ins with the Imperial Guard and Strontian, I think, Gladiator's cousin. and a new role for the character of Rich Rider. But even if they didn't put this in between issues, I was okay with. However, I feel like Ascension and Guardians played such a big part in it, especially some behind the scenes of what's going on. And I understand that, it's a difficult task to put exactly how many issues in between the event issues. I get it. But at the very least, I wish they had done that, because there's a couple of setups here for the stories of Guardians of the Galaxy and how they get involved. And as a matter of fact, there are a couple of deaths that take place in Guardians of the Galaxy and a couple of other series that are after the main event. Is it a deal breaker? Well, obviously not. I love this story so much, and I still recommend it because it's such a good story. Do you want to flip back and forth? That's up to you, honestly. There are reading guides out there. I actually printed out when I used to have, before there was an omnibus, the first printing, and this new printing, there was an oversized hardcover, and I printed out a reading order that I had it taped on it. I got rid of that a long time. I think it was one of our first giveaways we did, but I got rid of it a long time ago, and yeah, that's up to you. There are definitely reading guides. Oh my god, I forgot about Wes Craig drawing this. And this is during the time when people were making fun of Guardians of the Galaxy artwork. They were like, sometimes we get great artwork, and then sometimes we get... I saw an article like that. And little did those people know that this guy would go on and blow up and draw Deadly Class, one of my favorite Rick Remender stories. But he was the artist on Guardians of the Galaxy too. So after the Guardians of the Galaxy story, all the way up to issue number 19, that sets up a lot of the events that happen in Thanos Imperative, and then that's where they collect Who Will Rule. And I think that ends perfectly. Who Will Rule should be the last book collected in here. And that sets up the events that are to come in the Thanos Imperative, which is collected in the Realm of Kings Omnibus. So, let's welcome everybody back that did not want any sort of spoilers at all. Let's look at the back matter together. Here we have variant covers and the spotlight and the setup for what will become War of Kings, how the Guardians of the Galaxy played a part in there. Man, do I miss this era. I mean, these are interviews with Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. Then you have an interview here with Paul Pelletier, who was the main artist on the War of Kings. You have original artwork there. A little behind the scenes as to how Vulcan became Emperor, but if you've read it already, you know that. The spotlight on my dude, Darkhawk. Been a long time since I'd seen him show up. He was in Runaways for a while. And then how the status quo changed for the Inhumans to be where they are by the beginning of this omnibus. We have some other variant covers here, including Adam Warlock there, and then some designs here by Wes Craig for the Guardians of the Galaxy stories. This is a pinup, I think, Uncanny? Yeah, Uncanny X-Men pinup, some Billy Tan designs for his X-Men in Space story arc. I didn't even mention the badassness that is Corvus, or how badass Warpath was during this series, too. Kind of missed him being on X-Men. And then sketches, and this is the cover sketches right here for X-Men. End paper. Alright, let's look at this binding one more time, and then we'll do a comparison with the original print. 1,304 pages. It is sewn binding, and this is what the eye looks like. Which, compared to the original one, as we saw earlier, it's not much of one. Just in case you did not want any kind of spoilers, I did talk about the mapping. I love the mapping of the first half until we get to War of the Kings. Then I suggested some things that probably should have been in between issues. Just in case you did not want any spoilers at all and you're joining us. Alright, let's do a comparison to the first printing. Alright, we have the old printing here and the new printing right here, which we've already discussed how the new printing has the art blown up there. The same red end sheets and this image right here, which looks darker in the new printing. The credits for each issue. So in here you have the works of Ed Brubaker, Dan Abnett, Andy Lanning, Chris Yost writing a lot of Vulcan stories, Andy Schmidt, and so many other wonderful creators. The letter right here giving you a quick recap as to what's happened previously. Now, this old printing, this original printing was printed at the Donley printer, and this new one at the iMac printer. And you saw the eye. And the eye on the original printing here, it's a lot bigger. And that helps out with double page spreads like this. So you see You actually see Deathbird's face right here without holding the book down. Over here, even stretching it out, there she finally is. She finally pops up. So you're losing a lot of art because of that gutter curve. And one thing you may notice too is the colors are darker in this new printing. Same artist. This has the exact same mapping, the exact same page count, and on the bright colors here, or whites, you can see more bleed through than in the original printing. You can see frames coming over. Let's see if we can find another page like this one here, because you have a lot of light colors down here and here. So you can see some of the frame. I'm not saying it's terrible, but you can see it a little more than you can in the original printing. And I wanted to showcase how the new printing lays over compared to the original printing when looking at these spread pages here. It's Rachel. Yeah, so get a little bit more artwork here than you do over here, and that's mainly due to the eye and the binding. And then do a comparison towards the last third of the book with this conversation here of Crystal and her daughter Luna, to kind of give you an idea of how the books are laying over differently. And to look at the extras here to show a little bit of the bleed through that's coming. Again, there's bleed through on this one too, but this one just a little bit more. And paper, honestly, paper feels about the same. The thickness of the paper. Yeah, it feels about the same. I don't feel a difference. But that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build. And of course, the comparison to the previous printing of this book. Let me know in the comments down below if you are picking this up, if this was one of your most wanted omnibus reprints, if you're hoping that we also get the Realm of the King and the Prelude to War of the Kings Omnibus reprinted sometime. I guess you all know by now. Go and vote. Every year we do an annual poll, so it's really up to you all. But if you read the story, what you think of it, what your favorite cosmic story was, not just from the modern era, but from any era at Marvel Comics. But that's it. If you have any more questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.